Joni Lamb's life was turned upside down when a shocking secret was exposed, and her marriage was destroyed overnight. What seemed like a perfect union unraveled as hidden truths came to light, leaving everyone in disbelief. The betrayal, the lies, the secrecy, this was no ordinary scandal. In this jaw-dropping revelation, Joni's world couldn't stop talking. What really happened, and how did it change everything? You won't believe what was hidden for so long. For years, Joni Lamb's marriage to Doug Weiss seemed like the epitome of a second-chance love story. After the tragic and unexpected death of her husband Marcus Lamb, many assumed Joni would never find another partner who could support her in the way Marcus had. But when Doug entered the picture, there was hope, a sense of renewal. This was a well-known Christian counselor, highly respected in his field, and people saw in him the perfect man to help Joni continue the legacy of daystar and move forward in her personal life. From the outside, everything looked perfect. They were the Christian power couple, always pictured together at church events, holding hands, supporting each other. They had built an image of a loving, supportive relationship that gave their followers hope that after loss, there could be love again. Joni, always the strong and determined leader, seemed to find a sense of peace with Doug by her side. He was calm, measured, and appeared to fit into her world effortlessly. But as time went on, something began to shift. The picture-perfect image that Joni and Doug had presented to the public began to crack. Slowly but surely, people started to notice that Doug wasn't showing up to as many events with Joni as he once did. This wasn't just a minor thing. It became evident in the way he started to distance himself from the spotlight. When they did appear together, it wasn't the same. There was a coldness and awkwardness between them that hadn't been there before. The warm smiles that once radiated love now seemed forced, almost like they were trying too hard to make everything appear normal. Fans, who had admired the couple's relationship, started to notice the difference. Doug wasn't as present at church gatherings or ministry events. They would stand side by side, but the chemistry that once filled the space between them was gone. The smiles they shared didn't reach their eyes, and the body language spoke volumes. It was clear something was off, but no one knew exactly what it was. In the beginning, people told themselves it was just a rough patch. Every marriage has ups and downs, right? But the tension between Joni and Doug wasn't something they could easily ignore. There was a palpable distance between them, both physically and emotionally. The warmth they once shared was gone, and with it the image of a perfect Christian partnership. The public face they had worked so hard to build seemed to be slipping through their fingers, and they couldn't stop it. Behind the scenes, things were even more complicated. Doug, who had spent years counseling other couples through their struggles, was now living under the immense pressure of being Joni Lamb's husband. This wasn't just any marriage. This was a marriage to the woman who led one of the most influential Christian networks in the world. Every move Doug made was scrutinized, and every word he spoke was judged by the public eye. It was a level of attention and pressure he wasn't used to, and it began to wear him down. He was used to giving advice to others, helping them through their personal issues, but now Doug was in the spotlight himself, and the expectations were overwhelming. People had placed him on a pedestal, expecting him to be the perfect husband and partner. He was constantly under pressure to live up to the ideal image of the perfect Christian man. And as time went on, the weight of that image began to take a toll on him. It's one thing to give advice to others, but it's another to live up to it when your own life feels like it's unraveling. Joni, too, was carrying her own burden. After Marcus's death, she had taken on the weight of keeping daystar running, continuing the ministry's mission, and staying strong for everyone around her. She had to balance the responsibilities of leading a major Christian network while managing her personal life. And it wasn't easy. Doug's growing distance added a layer of complexity to her already overwhelming life. It wasn't just about the ministry anymore. It was about her marriage, her personal happiness, and her ability to keep everything from falling apart. The pressure from both sides began to erode the foundation of their relationship. Joni wanted to keep daystar focused on the vision she and Marcus had worked so hard to build, but Doug had his own ideas about how things should be run. These differences, small at first, began to grow into bigger issues. Disagreements about how to manage their personal lives, their relationship, and the future of the ministry became a source of tension. What had once been a picture of harmony was now becoming a battleground. It wasn't just about keeping up appearances anymore. The real struggle was happening behind closed doors. Friends close to the couple began to notice the strain as well. Those who had once marveled at their connection now saw the cracks. Conversations that once felt easy now turned into arguments, and the bond they had shared seemed to weaken with every passing day. The silence between them grew louder, and the pressure to maintain the perfect image became too much to handle. The public persona of a loving, happy couple began to feel more and more like a facade, one that couldn't withstand the weight of the unspoken truths between them. Joni, always the strong leader, found herself in an increasingly difficult position. She was used to protecting the image of daystar, making sure everything appeared perfect for the world to see. But now her own personal life was slipping out of control, and she wasn't sure how to handle it. As the distance between her and Doug grew, so did the doubts. She had to ask herself difficult questions. Was this marriage the fresh start she had hoped for, or was it a trap that she had walked into unknowingly? As Joni struggled to keep up the appearance of a perfect marriage, the people around her couldn't help but wonder, how much of it was real? What was happening behind the closed doors of their home? Was the idealized image they had presented to the public just a mirage, or had they simply run out of time to hold it all together? With every passing day, the image they had so carefully crafted started to crumble, leaving the world to wonder what was really happening between Joni and Doug. The unraveling of their once perfect image was more than just a loss of appearances. It was the beginning of a painful journey that would change both of their lives forever. The story behind Joni Lamb and Doug Weiss's marriage wasn't just about what the public saw. While fans admired their seemingly perfect relationship, built on faith, second chances, and mutual support, the real drama was happening behind the scenes. It wasn't just about them trying to manage a public image. It was about the deep, personal struggle that neither of them expected when they first married. Doug Weiss, once a well-respected Christian counselor, was now thrust into the limelight in a way he had never experienced before. For years, he had been helping other couples navigate their struggles, guiding them with wisdom and compassion. But suddenly, he found himself in the spotlight, not as a counselor but as Joni Lamb's husband. That was a different kind of pressure altogether. He was no longer just offering advice to others. Now he was the one being judged. Every move he made, every word he spoke, was scrutinized by the public. Doug had never been someone who thrived on attention. He preferred to be behind the scenes, quietly helping people. But now, he was the one who had to perform. For someone used to being the one who helped others with their marriages, this new role as a public figure was overwhelming. People who had known him for years now expected him to be the perfect husband, the man who could stand beside Joni and help lead daystar forward. The expectations placed on him were massive, and they started to weigh on him. In private, he struggled with the pressure to live up to that image. He had spent years as a respected professional, known for his work as a marriage counselor, but now he was constantly under scrutiny. He had to be the perfect partner, the supportive husband, the ideal Christian man. It wasn't just about his professional life anymore. It was about his personal life being examined, judged, and analyzed at every turn. That kind of pressure takes a toll, and Doug began to feel it in ways he hadn't anticipated. On the other hand, Joni was carrying her own set of challenges. After Marcus's sudden death, she had taken on the enormous responsibility of keeping daystar running while also navigating the grief and loss of her beloved husband. She had built daystar with Marcus, and now she had to keep it alive without him. It was a monumental task, one that required every ounce of her strength and energy. But now, with Doug in the picture, she had to balance her work with her personal life, and it wasn't easy. Her marriage to Doug was supposed to offer her the support she needed, but instead it seemed to add more pressure. She was already dealing with the weight of Marcus's legacy and the responsibility of leading daystar forward. Adding the strain of a troubled marriage made it all the more difficult. Joni had always been a strong woman, the kind of person who could handle anything that came her way. But behind closed doors, she was starting to crack under the pressure. The strain of managing a massive media empire, keeping her family together, and maintaining a public image of strength and composure was beginning to show. She loved Doug, but their differences in how to manage their personal lives and the ministry were becoming more and more evident. Doug had his own vision for how things should be done, but Joni was determined to keep daystar true to the legacy that she and Marcus had built. They disagreed on many things, big things like how to run the ministry, and smaller things like how to balance work and personal life. These disagreements, while seemingly minor at first, began to build up over time. It wasn't just about the ministry, it was about their relationship, their marriage. Doug was becoming more distant, and Joni didn't know how to bridge the growing gap between them. They started to argue more often, and the things they once agreed on seemed to pull them further apart. Doug wanted to change things, But Joni was committed to preserving what she and Marcus had worked so hard to build. She didn't want to let go of the vision they had shared. For her, this wasn't just about keeping daystar afloat. It was about honoring Marcus's memory and his work. Doug, on the other hand, seemed to be struggling with the weight of the expectations placed on him, and his frustration began to spill over into their marriage. In public, they tried to present a united front. They showed up to events together, smiling, holding hands, talking about their shared faith and commitment to daystar. But behind closed doors, it was a different story. The warmth and affection they had once shared now seemed forced. There was a tension between them that no one could ignore. They started avoiding each other's gaze, using carefully measured words when talking about their marriage. The smiles they flashed for the cameras seemed more like a mask than an expression of love. People who had once admired their relationship began to notice the difference, but Joni and Doug remained silent about what was really going on. They didn't want to air their dirty laundry in public, so they kept their struggles to themselves. But the silence only made things worse. The more they tried to keep up the perfect image, the more the cracks in their marriage began to widen. Inside their home, the tension was palpable. There were moments when Joni would look at Doug and wonder if they could ever find their way back to the love and partnership they once had. She had spent so much time and energy protecting daystar's image and legacy. But now, she was struggling to protect her own marriage. Doug was becoming more withdrawn, more distant, and Joni didn't know how to reach him. She didn't know how to fix what was broken. For someone who'd spent her life helping others navigate their struggles, this was the hardest challenge she had ever faced. She had no answers, no roadmap for how to fix her marriage, and no one to turn to for guidance. The pressure was starting to get to both of them. Doug, who had always been so sure of himself, was now questioning whether he could live up to the expectations placed on him. Joni, who had always been the pillar of strength, was now feeling the weight of her own vulnerability. Their marriage, once a symbol of hope and second chances, was beginning to feel more like a burden than a blessing, and with every passing day, the strain between them grew. The tension that had been building for months finally reached a breaking point. Joni and Doug were no longer able to keep up the charade of a perfect marriage. The cracks that had appeared so long ago were now wide open, and there was no going back. The private struggles they had tried to keep hidden from the public were now impossible to ignore. Their marriage was falling apart, and the pressure to keep it all together was more than either of them could handle. It was a painful reality for both of them. Doug, the man who had spent his career helping others fix their marriages, was now struggling to fix his own. Joni, the strong and determined leader, was now faced with the hardest decision of her life: how to navigate a marriage that was falling apart while also keeping daystar strong and intact. Their personal struggles were intertwined with the future of the ministry, and the weight of that responsibility made everything more complicated. Behind the scenes, their marriage was breaking down. The public image they had worked so hard to create was slowly slipping away. But behind closed doors, Joni and Doug were left to face the painful truth. Their relationship was no longer what it once was. The strain, the pressure, the distance. They couldn't ignore it anymore. The battle to keep up the perfect image was over, and the reality of their marriage had set in. It wasn't just about the ministry anymore. It was about their love, their trust, and the painful realization that sometimes even the strongest relationships can't withstand the pressure. Joni Lamb's divorce from Doug Weiss came as a shock to everyone, and it wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the end of a carefully crafted narrative. To the public, Joni and Doug had been the perfect couple. Their love story seemed like a second chance, a beacon of hope after Joni's husband Marcus had passed away unexpectedly. People had watched their relationship blossom, seen them stand together on stage, and admired their partnership. It felt like the kind of story that would restore faith and love, proving that even after deep loss, there could be new beginnings. For years, fans and followers had watched Joni and Doug's relationship with hope and admiration. After the passing of Marcus, Joni had become the face of daystar, the ministry she and Marcus had built. Doug, a respected Christian counselor, entered the scene as someone who could support Joni as she took on the monumental task of leading the ministry. Their public appearances, often at church events and ministry gatherings, projected a picture of stability, faith, and mutual respect. Their smiles were warm, their words always uplifting, and they appeared to have it all figured out. But behind the smiles, cracks began to form, and, over time, they became harder to ignore. Doug, who had been a constant presence at events, started to miss them. When he did show up, there was a noticeable tension between him and Joni. The warmth between them that had once been so evident was now absent. Fans who had admired them began to notice the changes. Their interactions seemed forced, as if they were trying to maintain an image that no longer reflected reality. The warmth in their smiles disappeared, and in its place was a coldness that couldn't be ignored. It became obvious that something wasn't right. The public, once enamored by their picture-perfect image, began to question what was happening behind the scenes. At first, people tried to convince themselves that every couple goes through rough patches and that Joni and Doug were no different. But as time went on, the tension became more visible. Doug wasn't just missing events. When he did appear, it was clear that the chemistry they once shared was now gone. The smiles were stiff, the words measured. People wondered what had happened to the once strong bond they had witnessed between Joni and Doug. It wasn't just about the public appearances anymore. It was the reality of a relationship quietly falling apart. Joni, who had always been a pillar of strength, was now facing a personal crisis that she had tried to keep private. She was already carrying the heavy responsibility of running daystar and trying to continue Marcus's legacy. But now, she was also dealing with a marriage that was deteriorating. The emotional toll of trying to hold everything together, her ministry, her family, and her public persona, was becoming too much. Doug, who had always been the steady one, was now struggling with his own issues, and the weight of trying to live up to the expectations placed on him was overwhelming. The pressure of being the perfect husband to Joni, of living in the public eye, was taking its toll on him. It wasn't just about love anymore, it was about living under a microscope, where every move was analyzed and judged. As the tension grew between Joni and Doug, so did the rumors. Fans began whispering about the cracks in their relationship, and speculation ran rampant. Some wondered if Doug was hiding something, while others believed that the pressure of being in the public eye had gotten to him. The truth was, no one really knew what was going on behind closed doors. What they did know was that the couple they had once admired, the couple that had seemed so strong, was now facing something they couldn't fix. The cracks in their marriage were no longer something they could hide, and soon the whole world would know. When the news of Joni and Doug's divorce broke, it felt like the ground shifted beneath the feet of those who had followed their story. For so long, they had been the picture of resilience, a couple who had come together after loss to build something beautiful. Their marriage had seemed like a testament to the power of faith and second chances. But now, that picture was shattered. The divorce wasn't just the end of their marriage. It was the end of the idealized image that people had built around them. Fans were left to wonder what had happened. They had believed in the story, in the perfect love that Joni and Doug had seemed to share, and now, they were faced with the painful reality that things weren't as they seemed. Joni, who had always been seen as strong and unwavering in her faith, now found herself facing questions from all sides. People wondered why the marriage had ended, what had gone wrong, and if there were things that Joni had overlooked. The pressure she had already been under was now compounded by the weight of public scrutiny. She had always been careful about maintaining daystar's image and legacy, but now she was faced with the painful task of defending her personal life in the public eye. For Doug, the divorce was a blow to his reputation as well. A man who had spent years helping other couples navigate their own struggles was now the subject of those same questions. The man who had been known for giving others relationship advice was now in the middle of a highly publicized divorce. People couldn't help but wonder how a marriage counselor could let his own marriage fall apart. The irony was hard to ignore, and Doug was left to deal with the fallout of his personal life becoming public. As the rumors swirled, it became clear that both Joni and Doug were now facing the consequences of living their lives in the public eye. But the impact wasn't just personal. It had repercussions for daystar as well. The public had trusted Joni and Doug, and their marriage had been a symbol of strength and faith. Now, that symbol had been torn down, leaving people to question the authenticity of the image they had presented. Joni's role as the leader of daystar was now under more scrutiny than ever before. She had always been the face of the ministry, the woman who carried Marcus's legacy. But now, the questions about her personal life were threatening to overshadow everything she had worked for. Fans began to wonder if Joni had been naive, if she had ignored red flags, or if she had simply been deceived by Doug. It wasn't just about the divorce anymore. It was about the story that had been built around them, and how that story now felt like a lie. The news of the divorce left many people reeling. For those who had followed Joni and Doug's journey, it felt like the end of something they had believed in. The couple that had once been the beacon of hope after Marcus's death was now a reminder of how fragile even the strongest relationships could be. The perfect image they had projected was gone, replaced by the messy reality of a broken marriage. For Joni, the decision to divorce Doug was not an easy one. She had tried to make it work, but in the end, she had to choose herself and her own well-being over maintaining an image. The pressure had been too much, and the cracks had become too deep to repair. In the end, Joni Lamb's divorce wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the end of a public image, a story that had captivated millions. Fans who had once seen Joni and Doug as the perfect couple were now left to process the reality of what had happened. It was a painful reminder that, no matter how strong someone appears to be, they too can face personal struggles that they can't hide forever. The perfect image had shattered, and the real story behind Joni and Doug's marriage was something far more complicated than anyone had imagined.